Great to have everybody on today. My name's Kelvin Chin, and today is our monthly, on the 30th of every month, open forum Q&A, question and answers about anything about the afterlife. This is basically, you guys kind of drive the ship, and you folks decide what you want to talk about, and you ask me, and we have a discussion. Hopefully, for the new folks, anybody who's new who's joining us, you've already watched the 10-minute intro video that I created after the first, I think, time we did it together, so that way, new folks, I don't have to say the whole context of everything again that we're doing here and so forth and so on, and talks about the 30th November talk from 2014 that you can watch separately on that website. So that's that 10-minute video. It's on the Facebook event page or whatever, or you can go to kelvinchin.org, which is my spiritual website. I have 4 websites. You go to kelvinchin.org and you can see it there also. Okay, it's easy to find. You'll see. Those of you who've been in my various classes, whether it's my meditation classes, my afterlife series, or this monthly Q&A open forum that I've been doing for the last few months, can see in the background, this looks like Kelvin's in a different place. Where is he? Kelvin's in. So I'm in Seattle, Washington. Now I traveled up for the weekend, and I'm spending the weekend here. I've had a great weekend. Now it's the end of the weekend. I'm going back to Los Angeles this evening with my good friends, Diane and Ray Rousseau. And some of you may know them from various spiritual groups and so forth, or maybe your old history and the TM organization that some of us came out of together. Although Diane and Ray and I didn't know each other, they're sitting right here. So you see me looking off to the side, wondering like, and who is that voice is coming from in the room? That's Diane and Ray. They're right here.
Hello.
But
Hi, and they're more than welcome to ask their Q&As too.
Absolutely, and they will. But anyway, I'm here in their beautiful house in their living room. That's what you see in the background here. And but we interestingly met just 9 years ago. So it's fairly recent in my 52-year history of meditation and spiritual stuff. Just 9 years ago, we met at the 30th November talk that I helped organize in Washington, D.C. That's when we first met and we became friends. But I came up here this weekend specifically to discuss with them my new book that just came out, and to discuss some ideas that we were sharing with each other about helping to promote my new book. So on that cue, here is my new book. What new book, some people are saying? What new book is he talking about? Funny you should ask. So this is my new book, After the Afterlife, and the subtitle is Memories of My Past Lives. So this is a cool cover, isn't it? My daughter designed this cover, and it really kind of takes you to different places, just the cover itself. But it is a collection of all of my experiences going back 45 years this lifetime, but going back 6,000 years in human history, covering a couple of dozen lifetimes that I have memories of. And I have different amounts of memories from different ones and so forth and so on. So I don't want to make this talk about my book, but that's the overall of my book. And I peel back the onion skin completely. I mean, layer by layer, I share every possible experience that I remember within the experience of that even particular lifetime, how every little thing unfolded, whether it was in a meditation or in a dream, or when I was walking around, or whether I was driving a car or whatever, what experience happened at any given moment. And I just, lay it all out there. So there you go. Check that out on Amazon if you're interested. So again, just to a refresher with this, today's April 30th, and we do this every month. So next month is going to be May 30th, and then June 30th, and so forth. We'll keep this to about an hour and a half session. So we'll go to about, I'm about 12:15 now in my time zone. So we're going to go about, to 1:45, and I want to keep it to around an hour and a half sessions with people. And then if we don't get to all the questions, you both bring them up next month, that kind of thing. So that there's kind of there's a limit, because I've had sessions like this with people that have gone 3 or 4 hours. So I'm trying to keep, that's why I'm doing this every month, okay? And it's just open. You guys ask any questions you want. I don't have a structure to this other than you guys asking questions, okay? So just who wants to go first? There you go. Anybody? Who's the brave first one, and then it'll get rocking and rolling.
What led you to look at this time?
What led me to write the book at this time? That's a good question. Well, first of all, you'll see when you read the book that I never thought I was going to be talking about any of my past life memories. I didn't think I was going to publicly talk about it. If you guys ever, any of you start having memories, or any unusual dreams that you don't even know if there are memories or not, I suggest that you do what I did not do and write stuff down, because I didn't write stuff down. I just thought, I discussed it with my friend George. You guys know who George Hammond is, who gave the 30th November talk. And I talked a little bit more detail in here about who he is in my life history for 6,000 years, because we go back several thousand years together, turns out. But I guess what started me thinking about talking about this stuff was when Jesus and Jehovah and Shankar and Maharishi, who was also John the Baptist, and he was also the prophet Elijah before that, and so forth, Shah Jahan in the Mughal Empire, more recently, etc. He was that guy, Maharishi, who you guys know I studied with in the 1970s, this lifetime. They started asking George and me to be more open and about our past. So I think that's what kind of started me thinking about it. But then you guys know I wrote the Overcoming the Fear of Death book first, and so forth, and my Marcus Aurelius book second, because those ideas were, I thought, more imminently needed, if you will. The fear of death. I wanted to get those concepts and how to think about that differently out there right away, because it's such a pronounced fear that so many people on planet Earth are walking around with. And then my Marcus Aurelius book is not about death, it's about living life. So I wanted to get those ideas out quickly to get sooner than this book, to get it out about thinking about how to live life with less suffering. And that's that 67 collection, 67 essays in that second book, the purple book. So this one, I decided to make this my third book because it's really a supplement to the first book of Overcoming the Fear of Death. This is the way I look at this, is to help people, and people will look at this book differently in different ways, but the way I look at it is as a way to help people overcome the fear of death in a different way, and to consider that we are eternal and that we can go into different lifetimes and different bodies and different planets and different forms and so forth and so on, and that there's something real and personal that continues from lifetime to lifetime. And that's why I talk about my personality traits in it from lifetime to lifetime. So I think it kind of captures a lot of the different ideas that I've been talking about. And quite frankly, it was just a way to get the stuff off my chest. I mean, I've been carrying it around since 1977, and these experiences. And it was a very, very emotional book for me to write. Very, very emotional book for me to write. It was, because you'll see when you read it, you'll see. I mean, I did a lot of crying when I wrote the book, and a lot of crying when I proofread it 5 or 6 times. So it was a lot of revisiting of a lot of stuff, a lot of experiences. Yeah. Other questions? Other questions? Anything about Afterlife? Yes, Teresa. Yes, yes.
Mute here.
Yes.
Okay, so I read your book, and yeah, it was really very interesting. And I wanted to ask you about the number of past lives we have.
Mhm.
I've read in some places that we have like over 500 or more. And then, so I was wondering if you agree with that, and if you do, why do you think you remembered the ones that you did, that you put in your book, and that, or did you remember any other ones that are not in the book?
It's a good question, Teresa. So the first question is the easier question to answer, but I'll get to the second one in a second. So the first question is like, how many people say 500? There's no number. Anybody who gives you a number, they're just making it up. I mean, they may be honest. I'm not saying they're, just making it up, but there is no number. There's no number of lifetimes. You can have as many lifetimes or as few lifetimes as you want to. You come here. Free will means personal choice, and free will operates throughout the universe, in my experience so far anyway. And that means that we choose to come back. Now, people may think, well, why do you choose to come back? It's so difficult here sometimes, and this, that, and the other thing. Well, you got to understand, choice means desire. It doesn't mean that you've laid out a whole plan, a business plan to come back in a certain life and have this kind of life, certain kind of lifetime. You could lay out a business plan to like a life plan, right? A life business plan, but that doesn't mean it's going to work out this exact way you want it to either. Look at the Jehovah Project and the Jesus Project we talk about. Jehovah didn't decide that he wanted John the Baptist to come down and be beheaded, and he wanted Jesus to come down and be crucified. That was not part of the plan, but there was a plan. And some of us, and maybe some of you, were part of that plan. But plans can go sideways sometimes. But we make choices. So we choose to come back here for whatever reason. Some people may come back for the ice cream. Some may come back for the, whatever. Some people come back to fight. Now, I don't think that's it's not something that I would advise or suggest people do, but people can do whatever they want is the point. And they can do it however many times as they want. So, and they can come back and learn or come back and not learn. There's lots of people coming back here and they ain't learning much. I mean, you look around. How many people do you look around and you see, oh, that is a concerted, conscious, self-aware person who's here learning life lessons? How many people, really, out of the 8 billion? I don't want to, I can't, I'm not going to give you a number because I don't know what the number is. It doesn't matter what the number is, but it's an individual choice that people are making. And some people are making that choice to learn and some people aren't. Not everybody is. And I think that's pretty obvious. So there is no number of how many lifetimes. There is no, I think we are eternal beings. Now, that's what my logic tells me. That we are eternal. There's no beginning, no end. That's the first law of thermodynamics, right? Energy just can't be created nor destroyed. So there's no beginning, there's no creation of it. There's no ending of it. Now, could there be a creation of human beings? Yes. There could be a time in the continuum where humans were created. That's possible. But I think that our soul, which is an essential part of, I think, the essential part of who we are individually, has existed forever. So that doesn't mean that I've been human forever either. And you saw in my book, I talked about one of my animal lifetimes, right? So, but who knows what other things I may have been that as a soul that was in a form that some people might not even consider a sentient being, and yet maybe we are in a way that we don't normally think about. So I think that does that answer that part of the question? Yeah. And then the other part, why first of all, yes, I shared with you everything that I remembered in this book when I wrote the book. So that's the blanket. That there's one absolute statement I can make about that. Yes. Everything that I remembered and every feeling that I remembered, you could see, because I know you read the book, the manuscript, Teresa. You saw, I tried to get very granular, in what I told you guys in the book about all the feelings and the doubts that I had at different points of these memories and so forth. And the physical feeling that I was experiencing that I remembered and so forth. I put it all out there. right? But have I had other experiences since I wrote the book? Yes. And will they continue? Probably yes. So I had another memory since I wrote the book, and actually was when I was proofreading the book. I said, I'm not going to go back and put this in the book. I guess this will be the never-ending book. I got to end. So I just ended it. But while I was proofreading the book, I had another memory of being an ancient native here in America, which long before we called it America, from about 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. I don't know, a long time ago. I don't know exactly when. It could have been 7,000, 8,000 years ago. It was a long time ago in the Southwest United States. And I started speaking the language and whatever it was. I don't know what. But I get this feeling about that. So that happened, Teresa, since, or while I was literally proofreading the book. And I didn't put that in. So, but yes, everything up to that point that I'm writing the book, everything is there. What I remembered this lifetime. Okay. Yeah. Good question.
Kelvin,
Yes.
before we go on to the next question, I just wanted to
Yes.
because I remember when I was watching our good friend Deepak's interview, and I liked it. I did. I don't like everything he does, but I did like what he said here when
He was
people
saying-
asked about,
to see-
do we remember? Yeah, Deepak Chopra. If we remember different, memories, and how come we don't have more memories? If this is the truth, past life memories. And he asked a question. I think it was an Oprah interview. But he said, do you remember what you ate? You what did you eat on this day, like 8 weeks ago? And the person was like, I don't know. And well, how do you expect thousands of years ago? So the other question that Teresa had was, why do you have, these memories, not others? And for me personally, with my past life memories, it's just like if there was food that you liked or incredibly disliked, you are going to remember those meals. The more mundane meals, you may not remember them. So in the instances, and you can see with Kelvin's book, or even in my memories, or perhaps yours, the memories that we usually have will either have some incredible trauma to them or an incredible love to them, but definitely an incredible emotion or feeling or incident. That's just
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Thanks for raising that point, Sharon, because the point that I missed on that part of your question. That's good.
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Tamara
Yeah.
has a question.
So, but before we go to tomorrow, let me just say, segue on what Sharon just saying, emotional, sensory. So I talk about this in my book, that question, I address that question, Teresa, in the book, emotions, sensory stuff, right? And most people don't remember their dying experience. Because why? It's so traumatic and it's so unpleasant. I think for a lot of people, embarrassing moments and really painful moments are stuff that tend not to surface like in Technicolor, because it's not something that's really pleasant. But I tend to remember those experiences. Why? Because I think that my fear level of death and pain, for example, and other experiences, you guys have read, some of you have read my book, I talk explicitly about dying and being crucified. It's a very painful process, and it's not short. It's long and drawn out. It's torturous, and it's intentionally was created as a means to torture people while they died. And it worked. It was torturous. So most people are not going to remember. They're going to block that stuff out, which I completely understand why. But why would I remember it? It was kind of your sub-question there. Why would I remember something like that? Well, it's not that I liked it, but I'm open to whatever the experience is. And my experience of pain, you could see when my Boy Scout experience, I don't know if you remember that Boy Scout experience where I got the hatchet in my toe, the tomahawk in my toe. And the surgeons who were sewing me up were talking about how my pain level, my pain threshold must be incredibly high. So that I think contributes to why Kelvin Chin can remember these really painful, physically painful experiences, and maybe somebody else doesn't, and maybe most people wouldn't. It's just something about my wiring. It's not, doesn't make me better or worse than anybody else, but it's just my wiring. And so it's kind of, I think there are logical reasons in answer to your question. And then Sharon pointed out some of the emotions are also a very strong reason to remember stuff too. Yeah, because that's, they leave deep impressions in us for many thousands of years. Yeah, good question. Tamara, yeah.
Hey, Kelvin. It's actually Tamara.
Tamara, thank you, Tamara.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah.
So I had a question around if you had, because I know you were one of the apostles with Jesus in the past, and I was wondering if you had gone, I mean, I know on the other side there's no time is different, but in the future, if you had come to earth when, I understand when Jesus is supposed to come back, did you ever go forward? See when Jesus is supposed to come back to earth and all that? Does that happen?
So let's talk about time first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll get to your question, answer your question specifically. But time exists on the other side, and time exists on the other side very, very much the same as it does here, and also is experienced very differently. So let me explain what that means. So time, first of all, most spiritual teachers who talk about time don't understand what time is. And then they start introducing other concepts in, and they use the word time. Time is a measurement of change. That's all time is, a measurement of change. So if change exists somewhere, then time must exist because it's simply a measurement of the change that's occurring wherever that is. So does change exist here? Obviously, change exists on this side, and time is simply a measurement. It's not sometimes people say, time doesn't exist, people just made it up, blah, blah, blah. No. They're not using English correctly, and they're not thinking it clearly enough. It's true that humans made up how time is measured, but they didn't make up the concept of time. The definition of time is simply the measurement of change. So yes, seconds, weeks, months. Yeah, humans made that up. I mean, look at in Rome, in ancient Rome, there were 10 months in the year. Now there's 12 months in the year. So humans made that up. You could change that, but that doesn't mean that time didn't exist in Rome, and now it exists now because it's 12 months and 10 months, or that time existed differently in Rome because there were 10 months and now there are 12 months. No, time was the same in ancient Rome as it is now. It's just measured differently. So time is just a measurement of change. So on the other side, this is where a lot of people get confused because they think that time doesn't exist on the other side. Again, they're not understanding the definition of time simply as measurement of change. So to determine whether time exists on the other side, does change exist on the other side? If change exists on the other side, then time exists because time is just a measurement of change. And so how do we know if change exists on the other side? What determines whether change exists is individuality, identifiable individual things. There's individuality. There's not some cosmic soup, I call it, where there's no individuality. If there's individuality, I don't just mean individual humans or angels or beings, that's obviously individual, but this is an individual thing, it's identifiable, okay? If these individual things exist, whether they be beings or not beings, conscious, it doesn't have to be conscious, this is a sweatshirt, this is not a conscious being, but it exists, it's identifiable, then there's change, okay? And therefore time exists. And so does time exist on the other side? I think obviously, yes, it must exist. I've heard mediums at conferences in front of 500 people speaking as a keynote speaker saying time doesn't exist on the other side. I thought, well, I don't raise my hand and embarrass them, but I'd say, look, if time doesn't exist on the other side, who are you talking to? Because individuality, you're not talking to cosmic soup as a psychic medium, you're talking to individual beings. So time must exist. Here's where the confusion comes in. Is time experienced the same as it is here? No. So the experience of time is very different. And so then people think, oh, time doesn't exist. Well, the way you experience time exists on Earth doesn't exist in the same way on the other side. That's true. But the measurement of change still exists because there's still change. You see, that's where it gets wonky because, and I give this example sometimes to folks. I say, I don't know how fast you can travel on the other side, but Charlie Lutz, I remember Charlie. So Charlie Lutz is a guy, I mentioned him in this book. He's one of the early leaders in the TM organization in the part that was called the Spiritual Regeneration Movement, SRM, back in the 1960s and then into the 70s. Anyway, but Charlie visited, one of our good friends really quickly, for like really quick, and boom, 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 he's gone fast. So people have experiences, and I've had my own separate experiences with Maharishi and so forth visiting me. And you can see that people can move really, or people or beings, we'll just say, and energy beings, energy within their light bodies can move really fast. So how fast? And I thought about this. Well, if we're energy on the other side, what else is energy? Light. Light is energy, and we can measure the speed of light. The speed of light is almost 700 million miles per hour. 700 million miles per hour. It's crazy fast. You know how fast that is? To give you a sense, you can get around the equator, the fattest part of the planet Earth, in 1/8 of a second at 700 million miles per hour. That means in 1 second, you could go around the Earth 8 times. I don't know, it's like mind-blowing fast, right? So people have an NDE, they go to the other side, and they go, yeah, they took me here, and they showed me this, and this angel, or Jesus, or God, or somebody told me this, and they took me here, and they took me there. It was like time didn't exist. No, time exists, except maybe you're going 700 million. I don't know, maybe you're not going, maybe you can only go half the speed of light, excuse me. Maybe you can go only 350 million miles per hour. It's like crazy. It's like go to the moon and back in like you blinked, right? You blink and you're at the moon and back. Less than a blink, So anyway, so time exists. So, and the other thing is, my experience is that time is linear, that we cannot experience the future. We can imagine the future. And I call that, having an experience beyond the imagination horizon is what I call the future. But and we can predict probabilities of the future. And that's what a good psychic will do. And the more accurate the psychic is, the more tuned in they are to those probabilities. But not everything is determined, because look at, again, I don't say this publicly typically, but to this group, I can say this to you guys publicly. Just look at the Jehovah Project. You look at Jesus and John the Baptist, and our cats are going at it here. Jesus and the Jehovah Project. That was not meant to go sideways like that. Jesus was not meant to be crucified. Okay? That was Paul created that. I don't want to digress into that unless somebody wants me to, but its future is yet to be determined. Okay? Now, is Jesus going to come back? That's up between Jesus and himself. Okay? Yeah, Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too, with the free will. That's up to him to make that choice. No sacrificial lambs here. Hopefully not. But here's the thing. There's another question in the chat.
Yeah.
And then I think some people would like to ask or comment some things on the 30th November.
Sure.
But let's go to the chat. And this is Christy Williamson. Christy, would you like me to read your question, or would you like to read your question? Basically, in a nutshell, and it's really well.
Christy just unmuted. Go ahead, Christy.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Christy.
You can read my question if you like, or I can read it. I just thought it would be easier in the chat.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think it's a really great question. So why don't you go ahead and say it in your own words there?
Sure.
Yeah.
I just said as I move forward in my spiritual journey, I get more confused about the Christian religious beliefs that I've been taught. Like you can only get to this place called heaven is through Jesus Christ and asking for sin forgiveness. Also, this theory of going to hell or being cast to hell for sin or taking your own life cast you into this place called hell. And I'm trying to understand how I feel about the Bible and religion. And none of what I mentioned is how I believe. I don't believe in this place called heaven or hell or the devil. I also don't believe Jesus Christ is the only way to get to this place called heaven on the other side. So I've been told I'm not Christian and I'm not sure what I am.
Yeah.
Wait, can I just take a crack at that, Kelvin, for a second,
Go,
please, if you
yeah.
don't mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
And in my social work classes, and one of them I had a lot of wonderful teachers, but this one was gender and sexuality and things like that. And with all the transitions and transitions, in this world today with the fluidity of gender, let's just take, and he said, you are what you say you are. Am I a girl? Am I a guy? What am I? Right? You are what you say you are. The definition is the fluidity of it. Am I a Christian? If you feel that in your heart that is what you are and that is what you identify with, even if the indoctrination does not coincide with your thought processes or belief system, then call yourself a Christian. You know what I mean? If others are saying, well, you're not a Christian and you're not the king of the Jews, but and all that, you are who you say you are. If you feel comfortable saying, I'm Jewish, I'm Muslim, I'm Christian, I'm this, I'm that, that's who you say you are. And if not, then you're not a Christian. If you feel that you are, then you are. But that's
Yeah, I
in my
think,
belief system. And I
Christy,
could be wrong.
yeah, and I think, Christy, what Sharon's saying is what other people are saying, what labeling you is really irrelevant. What's important is how you think about yourself. And when we're talking about beliefs, like you're talking about, I let people determine what their beliefs are. I'm sharing ideas and concepts with you guys. I'm a teacher. I'm not a preacher. I teach ideas and concepts, and I teach different ways for people to think about stuff, and how what your beliefs are, or whatever. Now, Christy, you're asking me what I think. If you're asking me my beliefs and my opinions about what you said, then I'll tell you. I mean, heaven. I just call it the afterlife because I try to demystify these concepts and make them non-religious. So, but you could call it heaven. If people feel comfortable calling it heaven, they can call it heaven. I call it afterlife. The fact is, when we physically, biologically die, I've had personally have many experiences on the other side. And I don't have to die to have experiences on the other side. And I don't have to have an NDE to have experiences on the other side. So I know it exists, but those who have not had the experience, I understand you still may have doubts and so forth and so on. And you'll find out when you find out. I say that to all of my students who have fears about death and dying. I said, we're all going to find out at that most intimate moment of our lives, which is that most intimate moment when our biological body shuts off. That's when we're all going to know. That's one of the few times in our lifetime where it's binary, it's on or off. And when the biology shuts off, one or two things going to happen. Either your mind's going to continue or it's not. It's pretty clear. Well, one of those is going to happen. And if it turns off, and like, my father believed, he didn't have any fears about death and dying. He thought his mind's going to turn off when his biological body shut off. Now, he was surprised when it didn't, and he came back and visited us, and he's even visited one of my students. If you guys have seen that story on my website, he visited one of my students in his dream and communicated with my students. So my dad now knows that his mind continues, even his body is died. But I never, ever try to change him, and I don't try to change any of you in terms of changing your belief systems, because your belief system you need to embrace. We talk about self-love a lot. Well, self-love to me means embracing everything of who we are. And that means even the confusion that we may have about death and dying, we need to embrace that. It's okay. It's okay not to know. It's okay to not be sure. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're asking me, Christy, if hell exists as an objective reality on the other side, the answer is no. Not my experience. The hell does not exist. Now, are there consequences to one's actions? Yes. There are always consequences to one's actions, but you're not structurally punished by some group of panel of judges or something or whatever. You are always subject to the good and the bad consequences that we have each done to anybody we have been with. We will never ever forget. You know that phrase, forgive and forget? It's a mistake. The person who said that didn't literally mean, I hope, didn't literally mean that you forget, because nobody ever forgets. What they meant by that is forgive and move on. But the forget part is we never forget. We don't. We always remember the good and the bad, the good, bad, and the ugly, as they say. And that means on the other side. So if somebody has been bad to somebody, hurtful, and I'm saying bad, meaning hurtful or cruel, the person they victimize is not going to forget, and they might. There might be some consequences they run into them on the other side, But there's no structural hell. I can't remember what other on your list. Jesus Christ. To go through Jesus. Jesus never said that. Okay, you want to ask me my memories, and we can ask other people who have memories of being with Jesus, and they'll tell you that Jesus never said that. Jesus never viewed himself as a God. Jesus was a teacher, and Jesus has asked us to share again with people, and he may whisper directly to you, each of you, that he wants to be known as a teacher. He's not a preacher. He was a teacher of ideas and how to turn within and connect, seeking the kingdom of heaven within. That was your own mind connecting within with that part of ourselves. And that's the way he wants to be viewed, not as somebody who has to be gone through to get to this place called heaven. Paul started creating this idea, and I talk about this in some detail in my book, the new book. I talk about the Paul experience and how my memories of being with Paul 2,000 years ago, and how ticked off I was, to be honest. I'm using the PG version of how I felt, but and he what he did, and he promised that it says that he would stop doing it, and he lied to us, and he continued doing it. And of course, free will, we couldn't control that. And then Paul planted the seeds, but then there were many others, Justin the Martyr and Tertullian, and there were many others afterwards over the next several hundred years, about 200-300 years, who kept adding to this whole, what is now known as Christianity. But Jesus is not the founder of Christianity. None of us were teaching anything we thought. I don't recognize, let me say to you this way, Christy, I don't recognize what is now called Christianity as what we were teaching. Maybe that answers your question. Does that help? I hope. Yeah. Sharon, did you want to add to that?
Yes.
No, I didn't want to add, but I did want to ask that if anyone has any 30th November questions, what brought you here today? We heard from 3 people, and we're very appreciative that we're an hour in. So I'm wondering about the other 24, or even if you have more questions on the 30th November.
I might. I had a question.
Yeah,
Donald Trump was claiming
That's
that he was
Lorraine, that's another
Jesus.
group. No, just
hold on,
kidding.
was
I'm
he
just
at the
kidding.
30th November talk? I didn't see him there. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
He's claiming that he is Jesus and
Oh.
Jesus-like. And there was a whole video
Nice.
where this lady was explaining the movement of how he is Jesus.
You're asking me if Donald Trump is Jesus? Absolutely not.
No, I just wanted to say that because that's a little off
Yeah.
for
But
sure.
it's an example of how a lot of people will believe anything. And it's also why I stay away from trying to change people's beliefs about anything. I share ideas and concepts, and I share my stories and my experiences with people, but they're mine. If they can help people, great. But I'm not doing it to try to get people to believe what I'm saying. And
But
so
he's almost like a Paul
he
because
is.
he has
Yeah, yeah,
all these people believing
right. That's exactly right,
everything
Lorraine.
that he says. I mean,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable.
So here's my takeaway that's very positive from what you just said, Lorraine. And you may be thinking, positive? Here's my takeaway, because you have been one of my students for some time now. And the huge positive thing that I just gleaned from what you said is your ability to filter. Your ability to filter what you have heard, and you've packaged that in a way that makes sense to you, that he sounds like Paul. And you're right. You're right. It sounds very Paulish. That is a huge positive thing from my standpoint. You know why? Because my goal in my teaching is to try to help my students think more clearly. Because even if you forget all the content that I have ever said about the afterlife, about anything, about meditation, about anything, if I can help you think more clearly, that's your mind shifting and becoming more powerful and being a better filtration mechanism. And that means that in your next life, in your life in the afterlife, in heaven, in your life in the next lifetime, you're going to take that mind with you. And even if you forget everything that I've ever said, your mind is going to be able to think more clearly, and you're going to be happier, and you're going to live with less suffering. That's what I just took from what you said. Powerful, Lorraine.
Yeah. I know I don't want to come back here though.
Yeah, well, you don't have to,
Oh,
and you don't have to, and you might change your mind. So you might change your mind, but that's how you feel now, and you may feel that way for the next 100 years on the other side. Maybe 1,500 years into the other side, you might have a change of heart. You might, but anyway, we'll see. But you decide that, Lorraine. That's between you and yourself. The decision to come back here is an intimate, personal decision. Everybody makes it themselves for whatever reason. And we don't always remember. Most people don't remember why. But, yeah. You don't have
Okay,
to.
thank you.
Welcome. Norris. Is that Norris next, Sharon? I think it's on the, yeah.
yeah, Norris.
Hi. Hi. Can you
Hi, Norris.
hear this?
It's a little fuzzy, but
Fuzzy, Norris.
Fuzzy. Okay. Is that better?
Not yet.
Any better?
No.
Okay. Let me.
Is it a headset issue?
It could be a second.
Yeah, I can't really understand you. Why don't we come back to Norris once you figure out your audio?
Any better?
Try again. Oh. Okay. Want to go to somebody else?
Kelvin,
Yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
just to, kind of look into that, and the personality. And I love how Lorraine said that, the personalities, the personality traits.
Yeah.
And that personality of, I am not enough. I need more things. I need more positions. I need more people around me. I need more titles around me. It sounds like, for me, personally, would be someone who isn't in a very secure position. It's actually very sad, and I do. I have some sympathy there for Donald Trump, just to put it out there. But if we look at the personality of Jesus, and loving others, right? So I'm accepting others, right? Not for who they are, what I wish or, not for who they are, not who I wish they to be, but that
Right.
love starts with yourself, right? You can't give what you don't have. And you
Yeah.
do, but you can become depleted. So a personality of, I love myself and I accept myself of who I am, not who I wished I were to be, comes from a real centeredness of a secure personality. So you can just look at the personalities. I don't see Jesus there.
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
be wrong.
Yeah, I agree, but I
yeah.
don't want to get into the whole thing of his, the
No,
guy.
I just thought it was an interesting point with
Yeah,
personalities.
yeah.
Widge, did you have a question, you said? Oh, you're on mute.
No, just, I just had a comment on this topic, just because
Oh.
as some people know, I own and manage a couple of trailer parks, which is really fun and funny,
Oh, nice.
and I love it. I have a number of people I work with there who believe that Donald Trump is Jesus. And the only reason I mention it, the thing is, some of these people are extremely nice, kind, loving, honest people. And the thing to keep in mind, this is in regards to Kelvin's desire to really have people use their rational thinking heads, is that a lot of really well-intended people can be profoundly misled by these Donald Trump and even St. Paul type people. I mean, it's really easy to take advantage of well-intended people if you yourself don't have principles. And so it's just a real warning of how even well-intended, honest kind of people who try to be upright, what the vulnerabilities are. And I think that this approach that we're all talking about, of really weighing all ideas from the perspective of logic and rationality, is helpful. That's all I would have to say on that.
Thank you for which
Nice.
saying that. I want to add to what you just said, because it reminds me of something that one of my teachers this lifetime said many times. Maharishi often said that the more aware you are, the more responsibility you have to other people. And you could transfer that concept to anybody who has any level of power, whether it's a greater self-awareness or financial power or political power or any kind of power that somebody has, religious, spiritual power. Look at how many spiritual leaders can abuse their followers. And we don't have to go down the list, but there's many throughout history. And Paul was one of them. But he didn't even view it as abuse, Paul, I don't think initially. He really did believe he was drinking his own Kool-Aid. So it wasn't malicious. But when one is in a position of any form of power, and you pick any of those categories, doesn't matter what, to me, one has a higher degree of responsibility for others. And that's the way I've looked at it. This is my opinion, and I share Maharishi's view on that as well. It's always been my opinion, and you'll see in my book, I talk about that explicitly, about my view of myself as a trustee. I've used this phrase many times over thousands of years, that I'm a trustee of the people. I'm a trustee of my students, you guys. I am a trustee of you. What does that mean? I look at my role as a teacher as a trustee of my students' well-being. That's the way I look at my role as a teacher. I'm not just here to stand up behind a podium in an auditorium and pontificating about stuff. I view myself as somebody who embraces my students and tries to help them really change their own way of looking at themselves in the world, if they want to, and they want to because that's where they come to me in the first place. So by definition, they've filtered themselves out to be that person who wants my help. Otherwise, they wouldn't reach out to me, right? And so, but my view, my role is not to change them into me. I don't want to change my students into a whole bunch of me's, Kelvin Chins. I want to change my students help them blossom to more of who they are. That's to me an example of how to be a responsible person in a position of, we'll just generally call it a position of power, of authority. And to me, my memory, bring it full circle to being with Jesus, was he was that person. He was that person. We were his friends. We were not his disciples. He was not a guru type of personality. He was not somebody who said, thou shalt worship me. No, it was, we walked with him, we talked, we laughed, we argued about stuff. We laughed and cried, as they say, together. We shared our emotions together and ideas, because he saw us in that same way. And I've learned from him as a teacher, and over the thousands of years, I've tried to be more like that, in the sense of be more of a teacher to my students, in the same way that I observed Jesus being a teacher to us, by walking alongside us, not standing in front of us lecturing. Jesus was not a lecturer. Jesus was somebody who walked alongside you. He put his arms around you. And whether he physically put his arms around you like he did with some of us, or whether some of you who were on the hillside and saw him, you were one of the 500 or 1,000, and whether when he was biologically alive, or maybe you were one of the 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 or however many there were on the hillside after he died. And when he came back in his energy body, he virtually put his arms around you. That's what I mean. When he enveloped you in his acceptance, to use Sharon's word, she was reminding us of Jesus's definition of love. Acceptance of the other person for who they are, not who you wish they were. I get a little emotional. And that acceptance was his way of embracing people. Sometimes he would embrace you physically, even if you didn't know you walking down the street. He'd embrace you physically. So, you see some spiritual, and I've been with some spiritual teachers today, Diane and Ray know some of them, where they wouldn't even touch your hand. They won't touch you. Really? Because they don't want to, you're lower energy than I am. That's like not Jesus, right? Oh my God, we know people from this lifetime. They're leaders of spiritual movements. They're like that. No, Jesus was not like that. Jesus was an incredibly spiritually powerful human being, loving, incredibly intelligent, and sharp intellect. This is, I talk about this in my book, how that's lost in most of the stories and so forth and so on, because people get swept away by his acceptance, because so many people are not accepted. So finally you see this guy who's walking around and he's embracing people physically or energetically, and everybody's like, whoa, I feel like he's embracing me. That kind of swept people away. But his intellect too, that's the personality of Jesus, okay? And so that's the personality you want to assess somebody against, somebody who professes, whether it's this person you guys are talking about, or somebody else saying, oh, Jesus, this, that. I mean, there's this guy in Australia who says he was Jesus, and he's telling people to buy all this real estate along the ocean because it's 10 miles in from the ocean, because saying that's going to soon be beachfront property and you're going to make $1 million. And he has like 1,000 people buying land about 10 or 20, 30 miles in from the coastline of Australia. And he's saying he's Jesus. So, I mean, think about the personality I just described to you, and then you assess whether or not this person or this person or this person who says they're Jesus is Jesus. I leave that decision to you. Other questions?
Yes, Kelvin, there's a question in the chat from Quentin about the 30th November and the merging with the absolute or not merging with the absolute in stages of consciousness, if you would like to take a look at that. Or Quentin, if you would like to unmute. unmute
Stokes,
yourself,
why
please.
don't you ask the question? Because I think
Yeah.
you'll be able to articulate.
Okay, so in the 30th of November talk, it's made clear that these people, these beings that thought they were going to merge with the absolute didn't. So they're still around. So the question is that Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, as you know, talked about higher states of consciousness, and people really continue meditating, many people, because of the imagined future in a higher state of consciousness. And I've had experiences, I'm sure you have too, just fleeting experiences of higher states of consciousness, but anything that's permanent, is there actually any truth to these going into a permanent higher state of consciousness?
Yeah.
CC, cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, unity, Brahman consciousness.
Right. It's a really good.
Calvin, can I just answer something that just came to me today at Dr. Schick's when I was reading a wonderful book, Beyond Medicine, and there was a Greek philosopher who said, you never step into the same river twice.
Okay, yeah.
And the permanency, the permanency of the state of non-permanency, the constant state of change.
Yeah.
That is probably the only permanence is that change exists.
Yeah.
Just sorry, I just
Yeah. So it's a good question, Stokes, and I'm going to reinforce what Sharon just said in a number of different ways. So Stokes, and some of the people here know that
Stokes? Is that your nickname?
It's my middle name that I go by, yeah.
that's his middle name,
Nice.
Stokes.
I like these nicknames. I need a nickname.
So my history. I was with Maharishi since 1970, right, for about 10 years. So I was an international leader in this organization. I probably sat with him alone a whole bunch of times. I sat with him alone with Jerry and the German national leader and the national leader of the TM organization in England and this, that, and the other thing, probably, a dozen times. And I've probably been in a room with 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 people, hundreds of times. So I've heard all of the stuff that you're talking about. So we don't have to get into it for those people who are going like, what's he talking about? Cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, unity consciousness, Brahman consciousness. What's he talking about? Forget about it. Don't worry about it. If that confuses you, don't worry about it. Because all of that is now being talked about. After Maharishi died in 2008, he started getting all of these other leaders on the other side. Paramahansa Yogananda came to me and talked to me about this while my tooth was being pulled. and like about this, that he's on board with this and so forth, about being open and transparent, that none of them has merged with the absolute, which is this term that's used that's the English translation basically of this Vedic idea that you merge, with enlightened, you become enlightened and you become merged, you lose your individuality. That's what merging means, okay? It doesn't mean connection. It does not mean connection. I've had the experience of connection with all animate and inanimate experience and beings and things in the universe. I've had that experience 1,000 times in the last 52 years. I've been meditating 40,000 times. I've had that experience thousands of times. That's not merging. But they took that experience and they conflated and confused it, and they called that merging. Okay, that's a real experience, connection. Many of you have had that experience before. You don't even have to meditate to experience this kind of merging. I mean, or not merging, but this connection. You could be lying on a hillside, spacing out, looking at the sky, and some clouds go by, and you just in this open space, mentally, consciousness-wise, and you just feel connected with everything. Or watching the sunrise or whatever. In these certain moments, people can just go, wow, I just feel incredibly connected. That's a real experience. But like you said, the key words you said that Sharon pointed out that she was highlighting, Stokes, was that they come and go. They're fleeting. They're coming. So to your question, is there a state that's constant, that's never? Well, it's not a state. It's a, you could say it's a series of you know, I'm much more wide awake than I am now than I was before I learned to meditate. So some people might call that, oh, Kelvin's in this different state of consciousness. I don't like to call it a different state of consciousness. I like to instead look at it as I have a much higher degree of wakefulness than I did before I meditated. Okay?
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because why do I like that? Because this whole notion of states of consciousness implies that you get to some place and you plateau out. Oh, and then you get this another place and you plateau out. No. Do you feel, I ask you all, do you feel sometimes more wide awake on some days than others? Yes.
Yeah.
How many of you have had the flu? And how many of you have, God forbid, had COVID?
Yeah,
In
I did.
extreme state. And how was your state of wakefulness when you had COVID or the flu or, you know, whooping cough or scarlet fever? I mean, you just pick something that's really fairly extreme from a health standpoint. That affects your consciousness. Did your wakefulness, state of wakefulness, state of wakefulness, did you all of a sudden lose a state of consciousness and you are no longer awake? Well, yeah, if you fell asleep, but I am not an encouragement person of people, this notion of states of consciousness, because the other big reason is there's two big other practical reasons. You guys know I'm a pragmatist, is that it goes down this I'm more important than you are road. And even if you don't state that to other people, you start thinking it about yourself. And as soon as you start thinking about yourself, it's a slippery slope. And if those of you who've taken my meditation class, you know those 12 words that Lillian Rosen told me when I was a 3-year meditator. Kelvin, I think you may be liking that a little too much. So even if you're not an arrogant person and you don't start pushing that on other people, oh, I'm more involved than you, blah, blah, but you start thinking you are.
Yeah.
Danger will rob. Danger will rob. And moreover, again, the further practical point on that is it limits your growth. The more you're walking around thinking, oh, wow, look at, I'm observing this, I'm observing, oh, I'm separate from that, I'm unique from that. The less engaged you are and immersed you are in the experience. And that, to me, is self-limiting, because a more expansive state of that, people call it witnessing, observing. People in spiritual circles, they call it this witnessing experience. You get caught up in the witnessing, you are holding yourself back from the next. What's the next? That's when you're in that, not aware of it, immersed in it, and there's further expansion that takes place. Okay? That I'm going to give you one example that a friend of mine, I'm not going to mention his name, let him talk about it if he wants to talk about this publicly sometime, but he does not get caught up in any of this stuff, like, because he and I've talked about, but he was steeped in it too from the 1970s. And so he has since ignored it all too. And now his experience right now is the only way he can describe it is as if he has 360-degree vision. Now, if he was walking around thinking about his witnessing and observing his witnessing and blah, 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 I would maintain that would have prevented him from moving along in his personal growth to now this. And now I admonish him to say, don't get caught up in this, because you don't know what the next. To me, our growth is eternal. And the more we get caught up in specific of experience or how we are experiencing, this is where, I mean, Maharishi and I have had conversations about this offline since he's died. And this is, I maintain, and I love him. You guys know I revere him. I talk about him. I've had other lifetimes with him. I talk about that in my book. So, so I mean this out of love when I say this to him. I'm looking at a picture of him right now on their mantle. He knows that I respect him when I say that I think that was a mistake of his. And Gurudev told him the same thing after he died. To point out both states of consciousness and this and this and this and this was a mistake because it limited people. Talk about witnessing and this and that. No. It limited people. It limits people. And then you have the people who are our age, Stokes. I'm not going to say who you are because I don't know how old you are. Guessing you're within 10 or 20 years of me. Okay. So so who are distraught that they've been meditating for 40, 50, 60 years.
Right.
And feel like they've reached these states. So that's terrible. So she realizes now that it was a mistake to talk about these things. It created a false expectation, and people meditated for the wrong reasons, and may have meditated for the wrong reasons, some of the people, and limited them. That's the self-limiting of diving too deeply into experiences, which is what he did most of those videotaped hours that I set.
He did, yep, I know.
But that's a Vedic thing. It's a Vedic thing, and that comes out of the 30th November, to your point. Thank you for raising it. Is to move away from that. That's the message from Shankara, who was Vyasa. Those of you who don't know the history, Shankara was also Vyasa. Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita is in the Mahabharata. So those of you who read the Bhagavad Gita, most of you have heard of that. Shankara and Gurudev are even more in the forefront than Maharishi is. Maharishi has now come along, but Shankara was really in the forefront of pushing this notion of, we got to think more clearly about this stuff, and this whole states of consciousness stuff has not been a good thing.
Good, yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah. Thank you for raising the point. Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Widge, your hand up.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll be quick on this because there's an interesting question about whether Jesus is reincarnated, and I'm sure somebody has something to say about that.
Good.
I just want to say that with regard to Stokes' question, I think in addition to everything you said, Kelvin, I think there is at least one very material misstatement and misunderstanding about states of consciousness that was propagated, to all of us in the TM organization. And the notion, so it gets this part of Stokes' question, are there conditions of, quote, other states that are sort of permanent? And what I would want to say is that, a person may be experiencing one of those conditions, but that it's entirely possible to experience something like witnessing for decades and decades and absolutely not have anything like spontaneous right action.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really different than, quote, being enlightened. So witnessing absolutely does not equal enlightenment. I think Kelvin probably goes a long way to explaining what, that we just need to forget about something like enlightenment. But so I think that there were conflations in what we were taught and what the Vedas teach about enlightenment and witnessing. I like Kelvin said, we can all feel far more awake and can feel more awake day and night for years, and that's not necessarily enlightenment. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, and the notion of it means perfection. Now that's what it really means. Now some people use the word enlightenment loosely, and that's okay, but you got to understand if they're using it loosely or not. I don't like to use the word because then I have to keep defining it and saying I'm using it loosely, because the word enlightenment means perfection. That the concept means perfection. It means you cannot make a mistake. Nothing you can make a mistake. And so the disciples of gurus typically view their teachers as enlightened. That's why they blindly follow them, because they think that they're completely, perfect, or separate from, not just in the Vedic tradition, but in the Christian tradition. There's this notion that the kings were perfect or whatever, because they were divinely, whatever, and God made them a king. No, it's like, no. I dealt with so many kings that's so far from perfection. Oh my God. And I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. There is no such thing. Perfection means static. It means no change. It means you've reached a point and that there's no growth. That's what enlightenment means, is perfection and no growth. If you believe that you're continually growing, you cannot believe that enlightenment exists, because it's the two things don't go together. That's oil and makes no logical sense. Now, yes, okay, some people say, well, I'm enlightened because they're feeling really good that day or something, or they're really having a good 10 years swing, whatever. But that's not the Vedic, the Buddhist in the Vedic way of looking at enlightenment, that state of perfection. There was another question.
There's a question from Ron.
Yeah.
Ron, if you would like
Yeah.
to unmute yourself.
Ron, where's Ron? Is he here still? Ron.
Yeah.
Do you see him?
Yeah, I'm here, Kelvin.
Oh, there you are. So many people. I'm like, look at him. Where is he? Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
My question is, was Jesus reincarnated?
Did Jesus reincarnate? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, notice the languaging. Okay, we're going to answer that question in a second. But was Jesus reincarnated? So that languaging implies that somebody else is reincarnating Jesus. So it's not passive. Reincarnation is an active. We use active voice language, right? We each reincarnate. So did Jesus choose to reincarnate? That's the way to, okay? Just
Okay.
no, there's no beings who are reincarnating Jesus. Jesus chooses to, or not. Now, could Jehovah or somebody say, hey, Jesus, I want you to go down? Yeah, you could have that conversation, but Jesus is deciding whether to do it or not. But yeah, so the short answer, has Jesus reincarnated? Well, first of all, you read in here about my experience with Jesus before I knew him as Jesus. I did not know that Jesus, that came completely out of the blue, right? I didn't know
Right.
6,000.
That's why I did want to ask that question.
Yeah, that was completely blindsided me. And I was told something in Sumerian. I don't know Sumerian, Shumerian, what the, and I went and I looked it up and it meant something. It was my nickname for him. And I called him Cosmic Order. It was just gobbledygook to me. I didn't know gibberish, So there was that before I knew him as Jesus, okay? But then, has he reincarnated since? Has he chosen to reincarnate since he was Jesus? The short answer is yes, I have heard that is the case. Does anybody want to share about that? Anybody here want to share anything or add anything to what
I would say follow the breadcrumbs on saints with stigmata from a fellow Catholics.
So, yeah, my understanding is that he reincarnated as Saint Francis of Assisi. So that's the short answer, Ron. Yeah.
Saint Francis of Assisi.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a lot of detail on it, Ron. There are others who have more detail than I do, but I don't. But I know I understand that that's the case. Yeah. Yeah. I was not around then. I was not in Europe then. You remember my book? I think I was in Asia during that period of time. Yeah. Traveling around Asia for several hundred years. It was the traveling Buddhist monk show for me at that time, I think. Yeah. Good question. Anything else, Ron?
No, that,
But Calvin, I think it's really important that, and this is really a great thread that I'm seeing throughout the Q&A so far, even with Lorraine and Teresa, and I'm going to get your name right, and I apologize if I butcher it, Tamara. Yes, but like viewing the personality, that is really, really important. And if you kind of do even a quick, okay, Wikipedia, Google search, or an elongated search on St. Francis of Assisi and Jesus, you can see similar personality, similar traits, similar missions. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sharon. Look at the personality. That's the lesson out of my new book, is look at the personality. Look at Jesus's personality. That's what I was talking about earlier when somebody was talking about somebody professing to be Jesus now. Look at the personality. Does it make sense to you? Because somebody just saying they're Joe Schmo, and yet Joe Schmo would never do that. And Joe Schmo would never do that. Joe didn't do that. That's not Joe Schmo reincarnated, But if you look at, on a positive note, like Sharon's saying, with St. Francis and Jesus's personality traits, then you'll see some, let's just say, unusual parallels. Let's say, yeah, yeah. Jamie,
You have a question from? Oh yeah,
Jairo.
Jairo.
Yes, thank you. Hello, Kelvin. Hello,
Hey.
Sharon. Hello, everyone. Thank you for doing this. Yes, this is fascinating. I have gotten to try to see the first 30th of November talk. Try to see it a few times because there's a lot there, and George Hammond, and trying to figure out some things like, could you talk about how you understand how the God of the religions of Abraham and then for the Muslims also, the God that maybe they don't, in the Bible they might say Yahweh or Jehovah or whatever they have in Hebrew without vowels, so they assume it's pronounced one way or the other, but whatever it is. And then and when Jesus refers to what he says, my father this and my father that, what if that father is not Jehovah but some other being that he's connected to, maybe Vishnu or something or whatever. And also these different deities, like in the Hindu tradition, would that Vishnu or whatever be the same as Jehovah? I don't think so. Yeah, could you maybe you need to do a graph of all these different deities and explain what each one is and how they're related? I don't know. Thank you.
I don't know. So my bottom line on that is, that's not my wheelhouse. That's not my area of study. And I don't have a lot of history in the Vedic tradition, quite frankly, other than as a Buddhist monk. But prior to Buddhism, back then, 5,000-10,000 years ago, is what you're talking about. My history in the Vedic tradition is non-existent. So, but no, I can answer parts of that. So Jehovah is known as Allah, as known as Yahweh. He's known as Krishna in some, depending on which religious and cultural circle you're talking about. Okay, but that's who Jehovah is. And Father and the Son, in terms of that, figurative, it's not a biological, obviously. Jehovah we don't, I saw Ted, your question pop up, and to our knowledge, Jehovah has never been incarnated in a physical biological form, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't been. I mean, to our knowledge, so nobody knows, nobody in the movement knows that he has been biologically, in a form biological. But the father-son relationship is an emotional, spiritual, energetic relationship between Jehovah and Jesus. So it's not between Jesus and some other Hindu god or Vedic god, whatever. No, it's between Jehovah. And you got to understand the general, for those of you who have, and those of you who haven't, I suggest that you do check out the 30th November talk. But those of you who have, you got to understand that the movement is a conglomerate of what you know as different religions. From their standpoint, they're just a bunch of spiritual teachers, right? They're not necessarily looking at themselves. Well, I'm the Vedic guy, and I'm the guy with the Jewish group over there, and they just, I'm the Buddhist guy. They look at themselves as here we are. We're working together as a group. They could look at themselves as the Buddhist rep, as the kind of Christian Jewish rep, the Muslim rep, whatever. They could look at themselves that way. But, and I'm not saying that none of them do. I'm just saying that generally the group, I think we should look at the group less as a tribal group committee and more as a group that's concerned about helping spirituality on planet Earth. Because think about it this way, Jehovah, if you've listened carefully to the 30th November talk, Jehovah left the group and he said, see you guys later, because they were mainly working in India at the time doing their social science experiment, they call it. And he said, I'm going over to this Mesopotamia area, in the Euphrates and Tigris River area. And I'm going to I think we're going to work with these folks over here in Judea and what we now know as Syria and so forth. And he worked with what before the Jews were the Jews, right? And before the Muslims were the Muslims. He's working with them thousands of years before, right? And then Sharon, I'm going to leave it to you if you want to speak to any of this, because you know the history. I'm not a biblical scholar at all, and I am even less knowledgeable about the Old Testament. But you have.
I did want to just say one thing, because Driver, I did have a very similar reaction, and I did speak to George, and he, because I do say God the Father. That's how I was brought up, for many reasons, externally and internally, why that, view of being of a father is important to me. And he said, okay, he has no problem with that. So if that's how, but it's not like you have to view me as this, you have to do but if something is working for you and not causing harm to you or anyone around you, okay, if you want to view him as God the Father, okay. Can there be another person out there from, another lifetime or intergenerational who's like, hey, I'm your father, and this is, Jehovah or God, and I use God, not Jehovah, just because, I have those connotations of people knocking on your door, Jehovah Witness, all good if that's what you choose to believe in. So I do say God, and yeah, sure, there could be many beings out there that are channeling, as fathers. But Kelvin, I just wanted to let you know that a few people did drop off. It is an hour and 37 minutes in, and Jamie has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. We'll go a few more minutes here, but thanks, Sharon. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Jamie, unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hey.
Good evening, good day to everyone out there.
Yes, you're in France.
Jamie, France.
I'm in France. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
sunny France today. It's very nice and warm.
Okay.
Aquitaine.
Yeah. Your old stomping ground.
The old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Old stomping grounds too.
So, yeah. Yeah, my question I have is, I think I seem to remember you, or maybe it was George, said in the 30th November talk that Jesus and Jehovah were redoubling their efforts and focusing more in the afterlife, non-physical, because of stuff that was going on there. Are you able to expand on that?
Sure, a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess the question would be, what are Jehovah and Jesus up to now?
Exactly.
Now that
Where are they? What are they doing?
where are they and what are they doing in their spare time? You know, now that they've kind of got the stuff out about 30th November and get that, they viewed that as a milestone to get it out in 2014. And there's actually, to be honest, a little backstory on that. That was like many years earlier than George wanted to get that stuff out, but we did it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was his original, the original plan was to get it out now, 2023.
Wow.
So,
Pushing the envelope.
yeah, but they were persistent, and so we said okay. And anyway, that was that. And if you know, I think I mentioned a couple people. You know, if something went, George got sick or something, then I was supposed to do the talk. So, but where are they? Where are they now? Jehovah and Jesus, they're still around, and it's not that they are completely checked out of planet Earth and whatever, blah, 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 but the whole group of the whole movement that includes them and others are paying attention more to the other side than this side, because the other side in the afterlife, to use the phrase that they've used with us, is that there's more work to do on here than there is even on planet Earth. Now that may surprise a lot of you, because a lot of
raised eyebrows all round, I think.
Right? People think, oh, but heaven, isn't it a place of perfection, isn't it? Why should it be a place of perfection if you take your sane mind with you to this place of light? It's a place of light, and it's very different from here, as we've talked about in some of my other classes. It's very different from here, there's no doubt. We don't have physical objects. There's no biology and everything. But your mind, your soul, your consciousness is still the same. Now, do people feel somewhat less stressed on the other side? Yes, because they don't have to take care of their physical body. Their sickness is not, they don't have to eat, they don't have to sleep, you don't have to, you know, go to a job that you hate, and you know, whatever, in order to keep the roof over your head and all that. You're not going to be in a nursing home on the other side, okay? And so, yes, it's a lot less stressful. So I'm not saying it's not less stressful, it's a lot less stressful. But is it perfect? And does everybody treat everybody with peace and harmony? No, because it's the same minds going over there. So what do you have? Think about it. You have a lot of minds who are just energy now, energy forms, who can do whatever they want and be wherever they want just by thinking, right? Manifest, think, boom. Well, a mischievous mind can play a lot of mischief with that kind
With
of,
more time on their hands,
right?
when they're not working and eating and
Yeah.
whatnot. Yeah.
Whereas that mischievous mind might get tired on this side because they got to go punch the clock and work in the factory or do this or that. And then they go get drunk and they kind of get almost, they forgetful of that, whatever they just did. And it's in a weird way, it almost modulates the mischief. Whereas in the other side, it's like, bring it on, man. I can do whatever I want. I am a mind. I got no body. I got no, free will. I did the blah, blah, blah. Now, the good thing is, if somebody's bugging you, you can bug out of there really quick because you're, I don't know if it's 700 million miles per hour, but 300 million miles per hour, whatever it is. You can just, yeah, leave me alone. Boom. Okay. So it's not a hassle for you. But the point is, there's a lot to your question, Jehovah, Jesus, and the rest of them, what they call themselves the movement. They got a lot of work on the other side, because what is rampant on the other side are religions. I mean, I call them religions, because what is it? Religion is just a form of beliefs that people have that they want to promulgate with other people. And the angels have probably hundreds of thousands, I don't know, I'm making a number up, thousands and thousands of religions. It's got to be thousands, because assuming the number I saw on Wikipedia, I saw, you know how many religions Wikipedia says there on planet Earth? 4,000 religions on planet Earth, 4,000. So I don't know what but so I'm just defining religion in a very broad sense of people with a similar belief construct who want to promote that on others. That's how I'm defining religion. But Jesus and Jehovah and others have said, you know, it's rampant on the other side. Because why? Because you don't have a job, So what can you take on as your job? Well, I'm going to go knocking door to door and get people to sign up for my angelic religion of X and angelic religion of Y. I'm not picking on, I don't want to pick on angels, but or you know, dead guru religion, you know, XYZ. You know, it's like all these beings who are now on the other side, whether they're angelic, and those of you who haven't heard me before, I use the word angelic to mean any being who hasn't been incarnated in physical form before. That's how I use it. You might use it more generally, include everybody's an angel on the other side, which is fine too, because everybody's energetic. But you know, there's a lot of that on the other side. So the point is, our friends in the movement are that they said that they got to they want to make a dent in that. This is my language, Kelvin Chin, informal language. They want to try to make a dent in that kind of that part of the universe, because we're all dying and going over there and taking
our stuff with us.
We take our stuff with us, but we get proselytized by them and try to get pulled into. See, and so then you have all these different constructs and beliefs and so forth. And that's why I'm teaching all my students, you guys and all my other students, to think for yourself. I'm not saying you can't, not to join a religion, but do it because you choose to, because you want to, not because somebody's fooled you into it, right?
That was also definitely a gift, you know, of that Jesus gave us, that discernment, you know.
Yes.
What was that? Wise like a serpent.
It's like it's in Matthew something. I have it in the book, you know, the actual chapter, whatever. But it's like, yeah, wise like a serpent. Was it gentle like a dove or something like that, or whatever? But it's
like a dove.
Everybody remembers
I
the dove.
see some people dropping off, Kelvin, because we're coming out to 2 hours.
Yeah,
I was just wondering if Joe had any questions. He's on your phone.
Oh, Joe,
and then if you wanted to kind of start to wrap up.
We're going to wrap after this one. Joe, do you have a question or anything?
No, I've just really enjoyed the whole thing, and especially that last section on what is on the other side.
Yeah. Good, Joe. Good.
Yeah. So for right now, no.
Okay.
I'm good
Okay.
to go. But thank you.
You're welcome.
This has been a pleasure again, and I'll be back.
Okay.
I'll be back, he says.
I'll be back. Great. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay.
Yeah, great to have everybody on. The questions bring next month. We'll be here the 30th of next month as well. By the way, I apologize to everybody for the screw up on the Zoom link thing. I meant to have it be the same Zoom link as the last series, but I didn't do it before it expired. So anyway, I'll remember this time. But this is the same Zoom link for the next several sessions. Sorry, the next several sessions, as in the email I think that you got from Zoom. So, but yeah. So see you guys next month. Take care, everybody. Same time, right? And be well.
Yeah.
Be well. Okay. Good to see everybody. Take care, Tom. Everybody. Yeah. Good to see you, Connie.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, good questions. Good questions as usual. Thank you.